Welcome everybody to the SIG Network meeting for Thursday, November 11th, 2011. And at the top of the agenda, we have, I think we decided to delay the issue triage to the end, but Antonio wanted to talk about some important deadlines we have coming up.
Well, you added the links to the PRs, but tomorrow is the last day for the cherry picks, and if you have something that needs to be reported, just don't forget to cherry pick and ping approvers, and so we can have it. And the other one is the deadline for code freeze that is next Tuesday. So I don't know. I think that
we're going to talk about PRs for code freeze, but the general message here is if you are either have written or are shepherding a PR that needs some level of approval and doesn't have it, please let the relevant people know ASAP so that we can take a look at it. The relevant people here being Dan or Cal or Antonio or me or anybody else who's in the approvers list.
Tim, were you bringing up those PRs and tabs at all? Was that you?
I wasn't. Do you want me to?
Oh, okay. I just put this list together and they were ones that I saw while skimming that seemed to have recent activity and also looked like they were at some level of consensus or needed something to push them a little bit further. I'm not, and I got question marks next to ones that maybe we can ignore. But I don't know. Do you want to just run through them and say, yes, this should be on the list, or no, it shouldn't be on the list for review by the 16th?
Let me load up a few. I just lost my place in the list.
Either that, or if we have some better way of tracking PRs that we think need the attention to get in by a certain date.
It seems like a reasonable thing for a project board. It also seems a little late to put together a project board.
Yes, it does. And I was like, man, I'm sure we have one, but then I realized, no, it's only for caps.
I think I've got them all loaded. So let me do the share screen.
Okay. And for the rest of the group, if anybody on this call has PRs that they think should get the attention, like Tim said, please ping people. You might as well put them in this list too. And then, at least they're in a couple of places that we can look for them.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep. Looks good.
Cool. All right. You put mine in the list. I don't know if it's super important. It was just a cleanup that I saw that I had pending. So I sent it out. If it gets in, cool. If not, cool. Ditto. This one, this is part of the IP mode load balancer stuff that was sort of abandoned by someone else. I thought I would take over their PR to see how complicated it was. There's the rest of it is not going to make it to 23, so I don't really care if this one makes it to 23 or not. Dead code cleanup. I'm always a big fan of dead code cleanup. Is somebody assigned to this? That's not me.
It's LGT.
Oh, it is? All right.
Yeah. So just
but it's not approved.
Approval. Yeah, it's
Who's
just
approve it?
approval. Yeah. I think it was approved as well, and maybe something.
Antonio or Cal or Dan, you've all got the.
Yeah.
With IPVS,
It's not. It's Andrew.
Yeah, but Andrew is not being active lately, so I think that. Okay. I mean, this was the problem. It is modifying some file that only your team has owned.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
All right.
IPVS does not have SIG network approvers.
No, it's not IPVS. It's the utils, whatever.
Okay. All right. It's assigned to me now. I will look at it. For what it's worth, if you mention me but don't assign me, I may never see it. So the best way is for me to assign me, and then I will cycle through the PRs that are assigned to me. Patch hostnet pod status for changing node IPs.
That's not important, and it's waiting on a cap.
Okay.
I'll take that one out of the list then.
We should probably throw milestones here, huh? 23. That was this.
And actually, maybe that's a good way to do it, is to milestone the ones that we actually care about, the PRs, and then we can do a search for label SIG network milestone, 22 or something like that, or 23, yeah. And that can be our our
This is the
search.
this is the cap that Carl mentioned. So this is associated to the PR that we just see.
Okay.
Let's bump the cap and the PR to next release, but let's actually do it next release. I think we did this and it was hot at some point and then got really cold.
Okay. Coop Proxy error metrics.
It's done with ship here. I agree with the PR, but Danwishi had some comments and I want him to acknowledge before merging. It's adding some metrics.
Do we think it's milestone though?
It's very minor. I mean, it's just adding some metrics. It can wait or it can merge. It's not
Let's try.
Yep.
I like metrics. Netlib to get node IPs. I haven't looked at this PR.
Yeah, this is my fault. I had a review pending and I didn't notice it until yesterday. But
so Antonio, I have the rest of today and tomorrow dedicated for this. Feel free to bump anything.
If you can,
yes.
Lars needs a review here.
Yeah.
How much time have I to fix this?
Till Tuesday, end of day US time Tuesday, so late in your night, I guess.
That's okay. I'll check it tomorrow.
This is the one that was sort of abandoned, so this is not gonna make it. I'm not gonna have time to finish the whole thing. So.
And I think it's a bigger discussion, Tim, to be honest.
I agree. I'm not. I mean, I thought we should do it. It doesn't seem like the biggest deal, but yeah, we'll take a look at it. Next. Endpoint controller delete custom endpoints by mistake after restart. Is this a Rob one?
I don't know if
It's I think I've commented on this. If I haven't, I should.
You did.
Do we think this is something that we need to go for 23?
And I'm waiting for a response. They need to clarify a few things. So
okay. This one, Andrew needs to come back and revisit it. If he does, this is not a huge deal. I'm not going to label it. It's good that we have a bunch that are not a huge deal. That means there's nothing on super fire. HNS load balancer health checks.
The keyword here is yet.
If we have stuff that's waiting on Andrew, I know that he's pulled away from some things, so we might not get his. We're talking Andrew Sycam. We might not get his time in the next week, so we might not want to block on him.
Yeah, that's for that one in particular. If we don't get it in, it's not a huge deal. I wasn't going to do it anyway. He said, "Oh, let's just do it," and sent the PR. All right, load check. I don't know this one.
This one is because I guess in GKE there's a thing. I guess I think you all found it in Google. Like it's like a. I don't think it's a huge deal, but I think the fix is mostly ready. It's making it so that the health check stuff works right, so that it doesn't have to default to, the 2-hop like load balancing stuff. So it's very hard. Like most people will never notice this problem, but I think it's a good fix to merge.
All right, I'll milestone it and we can kick it out if we need to. Component helpers.
I am following this one. This is something that me and Dan Winship we've been discussing about moving some stuff outside package KK to component helpers and other stuffs. I can see Kyle laughing because we have node utils network, utils network, utils network. But anyway, sorry, Kyle. Yeah.
No, I just this particular node controller utilities, and then there is node util somewhere else. And they're pretty much doing the same thing. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, but anyway, this is a cleanup team. So that's one to move things outside KK that will help to move to vendor Coop Proxy stuff as well.
Okay, so milestone or no milestone?
I think so, and I need approval from someone that got permissions, like you, Jordan, someone else, because they are messing with dependencies and other stuff.
All right then. That's
So
it.
I pasted a link at the top that is a search for PRs that are labeled SIG Network and Milestone 123. I guess let's use that as our list of important PRs for the next week, and I'll remove the other links.
I love this. Thank you.
All right. Last chance for people to call out PRs that were not on that list that they would like attention on.
They can ping us on Slack too, like
Yes.
last call in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Thanks, Tim. All right. If not, Bridgette, you're up next for the next meeting.
I just noticed next meeting is on US Thanksgiving, so maybe people don't want to have a meeting, but if there are people who are going to have one, then cool. But I imagine a bunch of us in the US will probably not be working that day. So I was looking into whether or not we should officially cancel it. And I was also looking at Thursday to December 23rd. I know I, for one, will be not working that week, and there may be other people as well, but maybe some people want to do something. Thought I'd bring it up because we've all been just focused and maybe not looking at the calendar.
It is the end of the year. I'm +1 on scrubbing.
Yep, me too.
Yeah, both of them actually, not this one.
The rest of the world gets the benefit of our American holiday, and we all celebrate the end of the year.
Okay, so whoever's in charge of the calendar invite might want to do the needful.
I can do that.
Thank you, Casey. I'm up. So I wanted to just say briefly how important it is that everybody feels like they can voice their dissent. So I've heard sort of through the grapevine that it's not always, people don't always feel like they can weigh in, or they don't feel like they've got the clout or the importance. They're not important enough to have an opinion, or they don't feel comfortable disagreeing. And I want to just be really clear on the record. The only way this whole project operates is if people who disagree. If you see people making bad decisions, and I don't care if that's Cal or Dan or me or anybody else making bad decisions. Sorry, Cal, I had to put you at the front of the list. Whoever is here, if they're making a call that you disagree with, I really encourage you to speak up. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up on a recorded session, then ping one of us on Slack or send us an email or something, please, because it's really important that we hear. And that goes for people who are vendors who are implementing these APIs. If we're doing something that you can't implement or presents a real problem, I really need to know about it. I really want to hear about it, and I want you to scream and jump up and down. I'm not saying I will acquiesce to everybody's screams, but I want to hear them. So please don't be shy. And if you feel like you're going to be shy and you want to anonymize it, feel free to send it to me or to one of us or Bridgette or somebody, and we will anonymize it appropriately for you and get the message across. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's not just Tim. I'm sure everybody feels that way, not to put words in everybody's mouth, but yeah, like we talked about last time, this is not a technology priesthood, and everybody's input is very worthwhile, and we would love to hear it. And,
frankly, we're way past easy. Like all the easy decisions were made years ago. We are now off into complicated, subtle, has implications for implementations or providers or whatever space. So all the decisions that we make, whether it's simply adding a field to an API or designing an entirely new surface, we need to hear from folks. All right, I think I'm next again. I wanted to touch on a fun little topic as I was looking at that IP mode PR. We noticed a pattern, and when I went to go and expand on it, I realized how nefarious this sort of pattern is. So once upon a time, there was service status ingress load balancers, which is a struct, several levels deep. And this struct has a field for an IP and a field for a host name. And it basically says one of these will be set if you have a service load balancer. And then we have this KEP that said, hey, let's add multi-protocol load balancers. And in order to do that, we said, well, we need an error. We need a way to recognize an error. So let's add a field to that structure, which is a list of optional list of ports where each port can describe an error. So if I said I'm specifying a multi-protocol service and I'm on a provider that doesn't support multi-protocol, I could throw an error message there, and at least the user would have a clue that something went wrong. What we missed was that this same struct was used by ingress to represent load balancer endpoints for ingress. And so while the PR added this field and properly gated it so that it's behind an alpha gate and nobody could accidentally use it, that only applies when they come in through service. When they come in through ingress, this new field just exists. We added it accidentally to our API. And as I went to deduplicate that structure, I realized, oh, I should just take out the ports field, which of course, all of our wonderful machinery, thanks Jordan, blew up on me and said, this is an incompatible API change. You can't do this, dummy. And so I thought it was interesting enough to bring up here. We have a choice. We can either eat it and just live with this and say, whoops, we accidentally expanded the ingress API, didn't really mean to. It's not an unreasonable little change, but nobody implements it as far as I know. And so we could just go out and tell people, hey, you should start implementing this. You can put information about your ingress ports there. Or we could rip it out and say, we never meant for this to be there anyway. And yes, it's strictly speaking an API change, but it's a bug. Or we could undertake a bunch of work to seek out all the implementers and ask them, hey, is anybody actually filling this field in? Because if you're filling it in, then maybe we'll keep it. But if nobody's filling it in, then maybe we should just get rid of it. What I don't want to do is have implementations suddenly start exploding because they're specifying a field that we don't understand or something. I know. So this is the fun of these sorts of API changes. And so I thought it was fun to bring up here and see if anybody had any obvious thoughts on it, or just for the record.
I'm gonna guess that Rob is probably the best guy to talk about this. I'm not putting him on the spot, but I think this relates to the gateway API quite significantly.
Yeah, I think the safest and least disruptive thing to do is leave it in and call it a feature. Gateway API, like you pointed out, already has a concept of ports in status. It seems fairly that this is really just a field in status, a new field in status that people can implement if they want to. It seems pretty low risk. It's something that is on its way to being a thing in service. You combine those things, it seems like it's not worth the effort to try and remove it. We should just embrace it. That's my perspective anyway.
What is the cost of living with it?
It's a very small structure that is in an optional slice. So from a technical point of view, there's very little cost. It's not exactly the schema that we would define probably, like there's a protocol field, which doesn't really make sense. But other than that, low.
Is it something that we would want to extend in the future? And if so, is it extensible?
The way I look at Ingress as an API is that I could be wrong here, but I think that it's not something we're trying to add a lot of new features to. It's generally close to frozen in my perspective.
Yeah, and it seems unlikely to me that we'll have a lot of Ingress implementations that are using ports other than 80 or 443 because Ingress never really grew anything except HTTP support. That's all covered by gateway, but not by ingress. So it's sort of at the best, it's a little redundant. But in theory, if you had an error, if your implementation had some way of providing for alternate ports or reporting errors, you have a vehicle for it now.
Do we anticipate this leading to exciting CVEs in the future? Surprise.
If nobody uses it, then no.
I don't remember seeing any cloud provider using this.
Yeah, but the problem is if anybody is using, we GA it and it's stored, and I mean, we are going to break them.
Right. If anybody is using it, then they were in trouble already.
Right. I mean, we are. I think that we are caught. Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, I think if we ripped it out, it would just deserialize and just disappear. It would be saved in their data, but it would, when we deserialize internally, when we convert between versions, we would just lose those fields. So if somebody was using it, then we're screwing them. But if they just happen to have the data, we're not going to like explode on them.
Is that something we should test before we make a decision?
My own inclination is in agreement with Rob. I think this is a case of the price is not too bad. It's not worth the medicine is worse than the symptoms, and so we should just live with it. That's my personal feeling.
I have a question. I see annotation cube builder. This is the first time I see this on a types file, a core. Is this?
I don't know why that's there either. No, I don't know why
that's not functional, there. Right? That's not functional. That nothing.
We don't do anything. No.
Yeah. So whoever thinks that they put this and it gets validated, they are actually not validated. We're not validating anything.
No.
That includes max length.
That's right. So this is the fun part. If we keep it, then we have to actually net add code. There's a good point.
Yes. That's at minimum, by the way. Like if we kept it, then at minimum we need to implement these validations.
Right.
I'm not really worried about the format. I'm just worried about the length.
Yeah.
I mean, those validations already exist.
They exist on the old type.
Yeah, but
so I'm trying to clone the type and make a different type so that we can extend the service one independently of the ingress one.
Yeah, but if we keep it, everything remains as it always be, no? Just with different code. Yeah, we are duplicating code only.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And for the user, it's the same. I'm trying to understand. I'm asking.
No, you're right. We just have to copy the code and call it done.
And
we don't get to alpha it because it's already effectively GA.
And if we remove it, we don't know what can happen.
More or less.
I mean, I agree with Rob.
Jay votes for delete in the chat. Jay's a YOLO kind of guy, though. All right, I'll leave this open.
I'm just trying to dissent because you said we're supposed to disagree.
It's true.
No, I didn't say disagree with me. I said if you disagree with me, say so, Jay. Come on, get it straight.
I was going to vote with Rob as well, but I was holding my tongue to let other people weigh in.
We don't need to make it a vote here. I have a PR open that was one of the ones we skimmed through really quickly. That isn't super critical for 23, but it does keep the ports field. I forget if I actually copied the validation over or not.
I mean, out of those three choices, it looks like we are either landing on eat it and live with it or rip it out. Is choice 3 of like ask people if they're using it still something worth pursuing?
I'm just not sure it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
The people who need to answer you will not answer you. I will tell you that right now for free.
No way to disprove that it's in use. Only prove that it is in use.
This is why we need a phone home. Okay. I cede the floor.
All right. I believe Jay has a slide deck to present.
Yeah, I can
Right.
make this. I can try to make this quick. So, status update. Thing. Hold on. Let me see.
Sharing is active, so go for it.
All right. All right. So here's where we're at. So, here's. Well, I'll start with a little demo. So Tim asked me to. He just mentioned to us that we should sort of show people what we've been up to. So I'll start this off, then I can show you what it does later. It's just so you can use this stuff now. So you could
Does everybody
clone
know
it.
what Kaping? Do you want to give
yeah.
like 2 sentences on what Kaping is?
Okay. Okay. So KPNG was a thing. Okay. So I'll give the whole history. So a long time ago, Antonio mentioned in SIG Network, he's like, I don't know who owns IPVS. What are we going to do? That was, I looked up all the dates. So I think it was around March the 18th. He said this, and it turns out like I think it's January. I think this was 2020. Mikhail actually wrote the first implementation of Kaping, right? And KPNG is like a modular Coop proxy. So it kind of decouples the whole structure of the code base so that your backends are separate from the thing that talks to Kubernetes, right? So for folks that haven't seen it before, it looks, I know there's a lot of junk on here, but like the idea here is that you've got this stuff that can pull in all your networking primitives, your API primitives from anywhere, a file, whatever you want, a generic model of a network proxy, a network topology, right? That needs to be load balanced. And then Kaping KPNG is just a thing that has all these separate backends, and you can run the backends on their own or not. So it solves that sort of classic scalability problem of I have 1,000 watches because I have 1,000 Coop proxies and I don't know what to do. It's bringing my API server down. It solves that classic scalability problem, but, and you know, y'all know about this. Like, you know, we have things like Typha and Calico, and people do this pattern all the time, right? To aggregate API server traffic. But anyway,
it also solves a code level problem, which is the logic of correctly watching services and synthesizing the set of endpoints that you're supposed to use on a given machine is complicated.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it solves the code level problem. And to me, that's kind of the more interesting thing, because I don't, you know, I think that Coop proxy is really hard to understand. And like going to what Cal said last week and what Tim's kind of said this week, like for people to be able to help more, making the code more understandable is kind of a cool path forward for those of us that don't know the Coop proxy code base inside out. So we've been working. So we started this Coop proxy working group, but the point of it was to be like, well, what do we do about all these things we want to fix? But it turned out that the first time we had a meeting, all anybody talked about was Kaping. So like, but then a lot of those people didn't come to the next meeting. And then we like started looking into the issues and the keps and everything. And some of them are over here if y'all are interested, but like, you know, like you can't hot reload the proxy. You could pass a DSR argument to a Linux iptables Coop proxy. I mean, the amount of weird things that we do right now, right, that we don't know how to fix because there's too many things in our way because of the overall sort of monolithic situation. So it's, you know, we've all talked about this. So anyways, we weren't really sure what to do. So we're like, well, wait, we could do whatever we want if we just work on Kaping because there's nobody reviewing it. So let's just go work on it. So like, we're like, all right, so let's see how much of this thing we can get working. So we got a lot of it working, right? So first thing we did was we got Kaping passing conformance on NFT, right? Which was the initial implementation that Mikhail did. Then after that, Ricardo did this cool IPVS sort of thing. He like hacked up an implementation over the weekend, and then we merged that, and then we rewrote it. Like, you know, this guy from Cisco came along, Hanumanth, and he rewrote it, and then he asked Ricardo not to kill him because he rewrote Ricardo's IPVS implementation, and then Ricardo was totally fine with that. So, and then after that, we implemented iptables. So the way we did iptables, because it's so complicated and so stable, we didn't really want to mess with it too much. So we just kind of, me and this guy Vivek kind of hacked on that together, and we ported it over by literally taking all the stuff in tree and like just implementing it underneath this Kaping API. And I think it's a really good example of how you can hide complexity, because like we were able to like just go like create a sync file, and you're able to, you sort of implement this declarative API. And I know folks, some of y'all know about this service changes and endpoint changes data structure. It's this thing deep inside a Coop Proxy that sort of caches everything and has this internal model. So what we do is we just sort of facade that internal model through here so that we didn't change IP tables that much. But all the other ones are different implementations that are more native to Kaping. Anyway, so yeah, got that working. And then I promised Antonio, what was it, I think it was in July. We were hanging out after a TGIK episode with me and Casey, where Casey came to it, and we talked about Calico, and then we promised Antonio we'd have CI one day. And so we built CI, but then so now we have CI, and we actually kind of fast tracked that this week because y'all wanted to hear about it. So we fast tracked getting it all polished so that it looks okay. Anyway, so we've got CI now. I just did a first example of it. And so each one of these backends, the cool thing about this is each one of the backends has its own CI, has its own GitHub action. So like these backends can be vendored. They're totally modular. They're totally separated out from the rest of everything. They have their own Go modules even, but they can still be compiled together, right? So you could still like, you could vendor them all in and make one big monolithic container, which is what we do in these CI jobs. And if you wanted to try this out, you could run this Kaping local up script. And I just ran that for you. And you could see we've got Kaping running here and everything else. Core DNS is happy. So, and we've got a regular CNI running. We've got Calico running in this case. And you could also, if you wanted to clone it down, you could delete cluster. What's the kind? Actually, just delete it. Delete. You could delete this, and you could just run the CI if you wanted. If you wanted to, like you could just run this, and this will do like a full end-to-end. Well, it doesn't run the full conformance suite. It just runs a couple of the tests, but we'll expand it to run the whole conformance suite and parallelize it. So like we've got CI now, and that's where we're at. Also, so then Lars did this really cool blog post, right, where he went off and showed people how to vendor Kaping to make your own proxy. And then Dan Winship actually wrote a README article about how to build a proxy, and then he committed that. So yeah, this is, and I think we uploaded this to like Google Cloud somewhere. We put it on a GCR bucket, the initial container he made, because it was real hard to vendor back then. But we fixed all the vendoring a couple of weeks ago, me and Mikhail, and now it's really easy to vendor it. Again, everything has its own Go module, so you can build your own proxies off of it. And what else we got? So I kind of walked you through this diagram. People can, if anyone who wants to interrupt or ask questions, whatever, like what's next? Windows. Amim is kind of hacking around on Windows. Rich Oss is working on porting the user space implementations over, just so we have a user space implementation, kind of just for the hell of it, for completeness. But there's some reasons why that's kind of useful. I think OpenShift used it at some point. In Windows, if you want to do something other than using the HNS, you have to do some user space proxying because it messes with the kernel and you can't extend the kernel using the kernel space Windows proxy. And we don't have session affinity working. And I know Dan's doing a bunch of stuff to fix that, and Antonio and everybody. So we were kind of spying on that PR, and we're like, oh, we got to copy that over and get it working. So we got to figure that out. And we're doing our best to track what's entry. And I think there were a couple of conformance tests. We haven't confirmed conformance on all the backends, right? So we think we got it all working on NFT. NFT doesn't work well in kind because of kernel stuff, but we want to make sure it passes on IPVS and IP tables and everything else. So this is all the scripts that I just showed you, and you can see, so it's running right now, and it's now running the E2Es here. So we've got end-to-end testing in place, and yeah, so this is about how far. So like we started here is 2020. This is Mikhail's initial code drop. And I think the thing that's kind of cool is we've built a community around this problem that's historically been something that only very few people were able to work on, but we still don't really know what we're doing. So like, if anybody wants to help us that's better at this stuff than we are, we might be able to make a lot more progress. But I also understand that everybody's busy and people are keeping the lights on all over the place. So this is just, I'm not making a sales pitch. We're just going to keep hacking on it. And if and when it looks like it's useful, like, tell us what to do.
But you can tag, at least you can tag me on PRs or on issues.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, and everybody's like been helpful, right? So Cal's came in and you've jumped in and helped us with some stuff for sure. And so absolutely, we definitely know we can count on y'all to help us with stuff. Absolutely.
So what I'd love to see is, maybe in the course of the run up to 24, we figure out, what do we want to do with this? What's the goal? Like, is it do we move it in tree and replace the existing Coop Proxy setup code with this? Or do we move Coop Proxy, like, do we deprecate the in tree version and use this instead? What are the acceptance criteria? How do we want to manage it in the long term? And, we don't yet really have an existence proof of out of tree things being versioned in sync with the main release, but maybe this is a vehicle for that. So anyway, I'd like this to see 23 is the only thing on my brain right now, but after 23, what do we want to do with this? What's the next step? How do we make this real?
If I may, so I think this is the right direction, right? Or the right trajectory, if you will. It might not be like on point, but it's the right trajectory. This is something like I'm not even thinking about that anymore. Right? I'm thinking this is the right trajectory. But the problem is when and how is the thing that I like. We don't have one of the things you said is we don't have a criteria. Like what's the criteria for allowing this to be accepted, not just by us, but to wide community? That's also in mind. Yes.
I was thinking a lot on that, and I think that we can have with, and for me the criteria is during one release it runs in parallel the same test, the same jobs, and the same everything. After that release, you should be able to do an A/B, switch one or switch the other, and in the third release you completely replace. You need to work by release because one reason, because the code is different when it's starting, when it's ending, when you are releasing. And for me, that's the key. If you want to put jobs in pro now, because the most critical thing is the flakiness and all this stuff. And the problem of replacing things in tree is that everything is affecting everything. So you cannot put something and let's see what happens, because you cannot say this is SIG network or this is SIG machinery or this is SIG whatever. This is Kubernetes, and a flake it can be for any reason. So if you want to start to replace this for Coop Proxy, and you have somebody that wants to work in pro, I'm happy in guiding someone to add jobs in pro. Then we can check the stability of the job the same way that we did with the network policies. And then we have metrics, and you can say, well, this job was working during one release without any flake, the same as the old Coop Proxy. Or this job failed more or failed less. Otherwise, it's a guess, and I really don't want to bet on guesses.
Yeah, I mean, we could, if that's what folks want, we could put that as like a goal, if that's where folks want to head, for sure. Right now, some of the stuff in Coop Proxy just isn't tested at all. So it's kind of like we probably should be removing stuff from Coop Proxy that's not used. So
yeah, but Jay, your second system dilemma, right? You're gonna have to hold ourselves to a higher standard than the current Coop Proxy.
Yeah.
So even if something that's not tested in the current version, it has to be tested in this version.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. And so like we hope to have more test coverage than what's in Prowl is kind of what I'm saying, because as of now, there's a lot of stuff that's not tested. So that's one thing I forgot to mention is we do have a new suite of tests. So y'all are familiar with these table tests. But like, this is kind of funny because we're just playing with this today because we were looking at the user space proxy and how weird the test results were for it. But we have a new set of service proxy tests that Amim has been putting together that use the new E2E.test framework. Obviously, we need to run the 200 or whatever SIG network and conformance and all the rest of the tests too. But I'm hoping we'll have way better test signal for service implementation sort of out of the box.
But it's just not only the SIG network and conformance test. You need to check that every time that, so this is SIG scalability test. They create, I don't know how many services and measure the time of a pod to creating, and that's a lot of stress.
Hey guys, for the sake of time, we have other things on the agenda. This is awesome. Let's carry forward the discussion about how to start thinking about a transition, a hypothetical future transition, and what we want to do to get there.
Sure. Cool.
Thank you so much for giving us this. I'm excited about this.
Cool.
All right. Next up, call for review on the CNP KEP.
Yeah, so
yeah, go ahead, Sanjay.
Yeah, so Yang and I are here from the team that worked on it. So about 4 to 6 weeks back, you may recall, we had shared the updated version of the KEP and asked for feedback on sort of the priority approach versus multiple actions approach. The feedback from the group had been to focus on the priority approach. And we've updated the KEP since then. We would like to invite the community to review. Yang, I think the link has been provided, right? And the agenda doc can be just added to the chat as well.
Yeah, sure. Hold on just 1 second.
And for continuity service, the main key points to keep in mind are this, so those salient points, just as a kind of a refresher, is there would be these instances of cluster network policy, or we might rename it something like admin network policy. Each instance would have a priority, and different instances would be treated in order of priority. And within each instance also, there could be multiple match and action rules. So within an instance, rules are ordered in according to YAML listing order, right? So whichever is first in the YAML is higher priority than what is next in the YAML. And across CNPs, you would be prioritized by the explicit priority field. And no two CNPs would be allowed to have the same value of priority. So this would essentially result in a non-ambiguous set of rules with 3 kinds of actions: allow, deny, and pass. Allow is a strong allow, meaning that traffic will be allowed regardless of any other namespace level network policy not allowing that traffic. Deny is a strong deny, it'll immediately be discarded. And pass is, it would be punted to network policy to handle.
So I think the major thing we wanted to sort of like get an idea from the SIG network today is, first of all, there are some discussions back and forth in the community, in our little group, in terms of the priority numbering, right? So there are 2 sort of like priority numbering schemes. One is that a lower priority number means a higher priority. So something like priority 0 means the policy is really, really high priority. And like something like 900 means the policy is a little bit lower priority. Now, the benefit of this is that, we in some use cases, this is more intuitive to people, and we can always have 0 as a highest priority, so that when people have a really strong stance on what the policy will mean, they can put 0 as they know that this number will never be overridden by other policies. But in other cases, people feel like we want a higher number to mean higher priority, and we can reserve something like 0 to mean a default priority case where this policy is evaluated after Kubernetes network policies. To solve this in the CAP, what we propose now is that we put the priority field as an intel string, just like the port number in the network policy, so that for baseline or default network policies, we can put a special keyword in there and say, okay, this policy is default or this policy is baseline. Now this is unambiguous, right? And the numeric values will be always evaluated before the Kubernetes network policies.
And let's go ahead and share the CAP so that we can point to certain things while we're talking.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So yeah, this is the first thing that we wanted to maybe get some feedback to see if a lower number corresponds to a higher priority order makes sense, or the other way around makes more sense for people. And in terms of priority, there is another thing, right? Because Sanjeev was just mentioning, right now we think, because of possible conflicts, we probably don't want 2 CMP instances to share the same priority number. That way we can, get around with, 2 policy instances, one have a allow rule and one have a drop rule, but have the same priority number. And it will be indeterministic. And it will be really weird to have CNI implement something like, if they have the same priority, then the deny always wins or the allow always wins. But on the other hand, if we wanted to enforce something like if 2 CMPs cannot in any time have the same priority, then there's a burden in the admission controller to say, if there's already a CMP created at priority 50, you cannot create something else that's at priority 50. Now, is this a okay thing for the admission controller? Because we sort of like needed to maintain a priority index on the policy nowadays, if that's the case. And
so that's another area where we would invite feedback from the community. And go ahead, Yang, but we've highlighted these and we would request that over the next, between now and the next meeting, if as many people can give us feedback so that we can close this and move this to a, standardized proposal. Go ahead, Yang, keep going, please.
Yes, and the last thing I actually wanted to mention is that, because we were looking at the structs for the applied tools and the peers in the cluster network policy. Now, I think the latest proposal we have right now is to have a new type, which is called the workload selector. The workload selector right now only has pod selector inside of it. Basically, it's accompanied with namespace selector to select pods in certain namespaces. Now, in the future, I know there are also CAPs that are working on service account selectors, right? So in the future, we may want to add a service account selector or something in those lines into the workload selector, so that in the cluster network policy, we can select these namespaces and then select the workloads, which can be pods by labels or service account selectors. Now, the questions I guess we have now is that, we don't know if the service account selectors and the pod selectors or other selectors in the future might still be mutually exclusive in the future. Meaning that, is there any cases in the future or the use cases where we might want to do something like in the same workload selector, we do pod selector and service account selector, saying that we wanted to select workloads that has these pod labels and matching some service accounts. That we're not sure. So if that's the case, maybe we also have alternative here. Instead of doing workload selector, pod selector, we can be a little bit more verbose and say workload selector and provide a workload selector type, which is an enum. Right now, it can only be pod selector, but in the future, it can be service account selector, pod selector plus service account selector, blah, blah, blah. It can be any combination. And we know that it will be very deterministic and and explicit, so that we don't fall into any file open issue that we meet with network policies when we're trying to add new fields. But we're wondering, if this is necessary to have the structs being this verbals, or if this is okay, and in the future we can just add service count selector or any other selector in this struct.
It's taking everything I have not to answer all these questions right here. These are great questions. The right place to answer them is in the KEP PRs.
Yes, sounds good. That's what we want. So we wanted to bring out these questions here, and we wanted to call for people to review it and provide us some feedback there.
Yeah, there's a number of points here. So please, it will require some amount of time here to go through, changes in the default implicit isolation logic, the conflict resolution logic. So definitely appreciate, especially the CNI vendors, Calico, Cilium. Folks from Antria have already sort of implicitly agreed. From the Red Hat also side, there's been some sort of loose agreement, but more input is welcome. So anyway, so the goal is by the next meeting, if we could have sort of the final set of comments, we'll be able to take it forward.
Yeah, I'll stop share then.
Okay, thanks. Next up, Bridgette has 2 items in 3 minutes.
They should be pretty quick. They should be pretty quick. First one is, I've been struggling with, do I even file an extension? Because it's so ambiguous what kind of effects things could have on people. Then I looked at this webhook extension support thing, and I thought that kind of looks like it's going in 1.23. If I'm reading this right, maybe that would make it possible for people to not have problems with if their service doesn't support mixed protocols. It's no problem. And so I'm interested in people's thoughts on that, because I kind of don't want to file an extension just to make a bad experience for people at some clouds. Even if other clouds do support it, I don't want people to have, I read through the comments, I don't want people to have an ambiguous experience that could lead to problems. And that's it. I'm looking at Tim because he's one of the people who said, well, if we don't handle, people could just get into a state. And I'm like, I don't want to give people that experience. So yeah, thoughts on that, and would the webhook solve that?
I mean, my initial thought is maybe the webhook is enough. It depends on people implementing it, right? So in reality, it's, I mean, yeah, it just punts back to the provider, right? You tell us what you don't support. Maybe it's enough. I need to go back and revisit the KEP. Maybe I'm just making a big deal of something that isn't that big of a deal.
Well, I don't think you are. And I think Antonio had concerns too. And I think, anyway, I want to revisit it. I think based on the fact that both you and Antonio is kind of looking and going, basically,
But
unless we can unambiguously say this is safe to push forward, I think we need to give it a little more thought and time and make sure no one's going to have a bad experience. Yeah.
I don't remember, Bridgette. I was doing that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do more reading and see after that's more fully baked. Okay. That, and we have 1 minute left, and I have a dual stack feature blog draft available for comment. I'm going to submit it. I'm going to submit the PR to send it to the docs team this time next week. If you have ideas and thoughts and comments, feel free to add them to that blog post in that Google Doc in the next week. That's all.
What is the history of the webhook? Sorry, because I don't remember.
Oh, it's just the support for mixed protocols. If we turn it on and it only works for some cloud providers, then other cloud providers, users could have a bad experience. So, and I don't know if that webhook extension support helps with that at all.
Okay, I remember the discussion in the KEP, because it only worked in one cloud provider, no? Or something like that.
I think it worked to some extent in AWS and it worked in Azure, and other than that, less so.
I'm mixing things.
Anyway,
sorry, I need to read.
I have the info I need for the moment. Thank you.
With that, we're at time.
And just to be clear, we decided to not hold next meeting, right?
Correct.
All right.
Correct. No
So-
meeting November 25th. That means the next meeting is
The 9th of December.
December 9th.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.